Imagine you're hanging out with your friends by the pool, sipping a nice cold drink, when suddenly a lion jumps out of the bushes and wants to eat you. You'll probably react a little bit like this. And this. And this. And you'll probably label this complex web of behaviours, physiological symptoms and thoughts as fear. But what exactly is going on in your body and mind? Is your heart racing because you're afraid? Or are you labelling your reaction as fear because your heart is pounding? In this video, we'll take a look at emotions and cognition, two of the psychological aspects of the biopsychosocial model. Back in 1890, a bloke by the name of William James wrote a couple of books called The Principles of Psychology. It covered topics from memory and personality to mental illness and emotions. At the time, it was a common belief that emotions produced the physiological response in our bodies. But James was convinced that was all backwards. Instead, James proposed that the order of sequence is incorrect. The bodily manifestations must first be interposed between, and that the more rational statement is that we feel sorry because we cry, angry because we strike, afraid because we tremble. Essentially, what James was getting at is that when we experience an emotional situation, our body reacts first and our brain labels that suite of physiological symptoms afterwards. So in the case of the lion in the pool, James would argue that you feel afraid because you've jumped, because your heart is racing, and because your palms are sweaty. The same goes for sadness. If you're slumped over, frowning and speaking in a miserable tone of voice, James predicted that those behaviours would perpetuate and may even cause low mood. And this idea has some neat implications for mental illness because if that's true, then the reverse should also be true. Could smiling, speaking in a cheery tone of voice and maintaining good posture help improve people's mood? In some people at least, simply not frowning can alleviate mild depression. In randomised clinical trials, participants' frowny muscles were injected with either Botox or a placebo. Because Botox paralyses muscles, the participants injected with Botox literally couldn't frown, and sure enough, they reported a significant improvement in their depressive symptoms. And there seems to be a very strong link between facial expressions that we make and the moods that we feel as a result. A number of classic studies have also demonstrated this intrinsic link. One had people watching a cartoon while holding a pen either between their lips to stop them from smiling or between their teeth to encourage smiling. Sure enough, the smiling people with the pen between their teeth rated the cartoon as funnier than those who were prevented from smiling. Given this strong biological link between facial expressions and emotions, it's probably not surprising that 6 basic emotions seem to be pretty universal. I could show anyone in the world this face and they would all report more or less the same concept. In fact, if you ask what any of these emotions were, then virtually all neurotypical people would report essentially the same thing: joy, sadness, fear, disgust, anger, and surprise. So why these 6? Well, each of these emotions seems to serve an evolutionary function. And given that humans are social animals, having the ability to communicate our feelings to other members of our social group would have improved their ability to survive and pass on their genes to their offspring. And this sociality of emotions seems to be ingrained in our physiology. For example, the sadder people are, the more their pupils dilate. A bit like this. And if your reaction to that image was something along the lines of, "Oh," then you've just experienced the ability that another person's emotions have to affect your own physiology. And this effect doesn't just happen on a superficial level either. In 2006, Harrison and colleagues found out that the more dilated the pupil of the person you're looking at, the more your own pupils will dilate too. So where do our thoughts fit into all of this? Well, our entire emotional response to a situation, including the thoughts we think, our physiological response, and our emotional reactions, these all seem to be governed by schemas. Schemas are our conceptual understanding of different stimuli and different situations. Schemas contain and organise all our knowledge about a particular person, object, topic, or scenario. You have a self-schema. It includes how you view yourself, your understanding of your strengths and weaknesses, your beliefs, your values, your knowledge of everything that makes you you. You also have schemas about other people, and the better you know the person, the more detailed that schema is. Likewise, you have schemas about every single animal, object, place, and situation you've experienced. And all of these schemas influence how you appraise encounters with different stimuli and different situations. So, if your schema of snakes goes along the lines of slimy, gross, venomous, dangerous, unpredictable, then you would appraise any encounter with a snake as a negative and probably frightening experience. On the other hand, if your schema of snakes contained concepts like beautiful, majestic, soft, graceful, then you would likely have a much more positive experience with any snake that you encountered. Our schemas influence how we see the world, and I don't mean that statement flippantly. This has actually been demonstrated empirically. Participants with and without depression were shown pictures of faces with either neutral or emotional expressions like joy or sadness. When they were showed a happy and a sad face side by side, the depressed people spent more time looking at the sad face. The depressed individuals were not only more likely to look at the sad faces for longer and attend to them more quickly, they also interpreted the neutral facial expressions as sad. Their depression had actually changed how they see and experience the world. And it's this aspect that makes our schemas and our appraisals really important, because they explain why two people experiencing the exact same situation can react so differently. And this is exactly what the biopsychosocial model is getting at. Our thoughts and beliefs, our physiology, our emotions, and our sociality are all intrinsically linked. And whilst we can look at each of these in isolation, it's often more helpful if we acknowledge their interrelationship and the role that they play in making us the complex, rich individuals that we are. Thanks for watching. Our next video will take that to the next level of complexity when we look at the individual and society.